I knew they would regret it exactly on payday morning when the payroll system flashed a bright red warning that read, "Negative net pay." That alert was not for me. It belonged to the man who replaced me because he was cheaper. The funniest part is that I did not need to take revenge with any dirty tricks. I simply let the process speak. In this company, you can insult a human, but never insult a reconciliation system. My name is Brooklyn Flores. I am 37 years old, and I have spent the last 15 years of my life ensuring that other people get paid on time. I was sitting on my back patio in Dallas, sipping a coffee that was finally hot enough to enjoy, when my phone vibrated against the glass table. It was 7 in the morning on a Friday. In my line of work, that specific time on that specific day only means one thing. It is payday. For a payroll manager, payday is the finish line of a marathon where you sprint while carrying eggs. If you do your job right, nobody notices you exist. If you drop one egg, the world ends. I picked up my phone and saw a notification from a number I had not saved, but recognized immediately. It was from a former colleague back at Brighthaven Medical Logistics. The message was short, and it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The text read, "He is screaming because his paycheck is negative." I stared at the screen. A negative paycheck. In the world of compensation logic, that is the equivalent of dividing by zero. It is a mathematical impossibility unless someone has forced the system to devour itself. I did not laugh. Not yet. Instead, I felt that familiar sensation in my gut. It is a phantom sound I always associate with a payroll disaster. It sounds like metal grinding against metal. It is the screech of a train's brakes failing right before it jumps the track. It is the sound of someone with too much confidence and too little experience messing with the general ledger. I knew exactly who had caused it. I knew exactly how he had done it. And I knew that for the first time in 3 months, I was going to enjoy my coffee while Brighthaven burned. The disaster started exactly 90 days ago in a glass-walled office that smelled aggressively of floor wax and expensive cologne. That was the day Lyle Harrington called me in. Lyle was our new chief financial officer. He was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that built generic corporate executives. He wore suits that cost $2,000 and had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Brighthaven Medical Logistics is a beast of a company. We operate out of Dallas, Texas, and handle the transportation of critical medical equipment. We have 900 employees spread across 3 shifts. We have drivers who cross state lines, which triggers complex tax nexus issues. We have warehouse staff on hourly wages with shift differentials for nights and weekends. We have salaried managers and commissioned sales reps. The payroll matrix at Brighthaven is not a spreadsheet. It is a living, breathing organism that tries to kill you every other week. Lyle did not care about that. He only cared about the bottom line on his quarterly presentation slide. I remember sitting across from him as he slid a piece of paper toward me. He did not even have the decency to look me in the eye. "Brooklyn," he said, "we are restructuring the department. We need to be leaner. We need to be more agile." I looked at the paper. It was a severance package. "You are firing me," I said. It was not a question. "We are eliminating the position," Lyle corrected me. He leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands. "To be honest, Brooklyn, your salary is significantly above the market average for this role. With the new AI integrations and the software updates, we really do not need a senior manager to push buttons anymore. Automation is the future. We can get the same results for a fraction of the cost." I almost laughed in his face. Push buttons. That is what he thought I did. He thought payroll was just data entry. He did not know about the time I stopped the company from being fined $50,000 because I caught a tax reciprocity error between Texas and Oklahoma. He did not know about the 300 hours I spent auditing the timekeeping system to ensure our drivers were paid correctly under the Department of Transportation regulations. He saw a salary figure, and he wanted to cut it. "You are making a mistake," I said calmly. "This system is held together by compliance knowledge, not software. If you bring in someone who does not understand the audit trail, you will break it." Lyle smiled that empty smile. "We have hired a replacement. He is young, he is hungry, and he is very tech-savvy. He starts on Monday. We expect you to train him for 2 weeks before you depart. That was when I met Grant Hollis. Grant was 29 years old and walked like he owned the building. He was the definition of the phrase penny wise and pound foolish. Brighthaven hired him for 40% less than what they paid me, and they thought they had won the lottery. Grant did not wear a tie. He wore a slim-fit suit that was too tight in the shoulders, and he carried a tablet everywhere he went. The first time he walked into my office, he did not ask about the pay cycles. He did not ask about the tax brackets. He did not ask about the garnishment orders. "So," Grant said, leaning against my doorframe, "you are the payroll lady." "I am the payroll manager," I corrected him. "Right," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Lyle tells me the system is pretty clunky. I'm going to streamline it. Optimize the workflow. I have a background in data analytics. I can probably automate 90% of what you do in a week. You just let me optimize this." I looked at him. I looked at his expensive watch and his complete lack of fear. He had no idea what he was looking at. He saw numbers. I saw people's livelihoods. He saw data points. I saw federal laws. "Grant," I said, "payroll is not about optimization. It is about accuracy and compliance. We have 18 different pay codes. We have retroactive overtime calculations. If you change one variable without understanding the downstream impact, you will trigger an audit." He laughed. He actually laughed. "You sound like a textbook. Brooklyn, relax. It is just math. If it is wrong, we fix it in the next cycle. No big deal." That was the moment I stopped caring. I realized that arguing with Grant Hollis was like trying to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. He was arrogant because he was ignorant. He thought he could replace 15 years of experience with a few shortcuts and a confident attitude. I spent the next 2 weeks doing exactly what was asked of me. I showed him the menus. I gave him the user manuals. I showed him how to run the standard reports. But I did not teach him the wisdom. I did not teach him how to listen to the system. I did not tell him that when the general ledger does not balance by exactly 1 cent, it usually means a tax table has corrupted. I watched him nod and check his phone while I explained the importance of the approval hierarchy. I watched him roll his eyes when I talked about the Sarbanes-Oxley Act controls. He was not listening. He was waiting for me to leave so he could rewrite the rules. "You are too rigid," he told me on my last day. "You treat this like it is bomb defusal. It is just money." "It is not just money," I said as I packed the picture of my dog into my box. "It is trust. If you mess up their pay, they will never trust you again." "I will be fine," Grant said. He sat in my chair. He put his feet up on the desk. "Enjoy your retirement." I am 37. I was not retiring. I was being discarded for a cheaper model. Now 3 months later, I sat on my patio and looked at the text message again. Grant had been running the show for 90 days. I knew what had happened. I knew it as clearly as if I were standing in the server room. Grant had tried to be clever. He had probably tried to override a system limitation to pay himself or someone else a bonus without the proper tax withholding. He likely thought he could force the system to pay a net amount without calculating the gross up. He thought he could cheat the logic. But you can replace the payroll runner. You can fire the manager. You can hire a cheaper kid who speaks in buzzwords. But you cannot replace the tax laws. You cannot replace the audit trail. And you absolutely cannot negotiate with a bank reconciliation file. I closed my eyes and imagined the screen Grant was looking at right now. I could see the interface of the payroll software perfectly in my mind. The background would be gray. The text fields would be white. But right in the center of the employee profile there would be a banner. It would not be green. It would be a violent, flashing red. It was the system's way of saying that the math had finally caught up with the arrogance. I typed a reply to my former colleague. "Send me a picture." A minute later, the image loaded on my screen. It was a photo of Grant's monitor taken hastily from a cubicle angle. Grant was not in the frame, but I could imagine his face. The screen displayed his personal pay stub for the current period. The net pay field did not show a positive number. It showed a negative balance enclosed in parentheses. And right below it, in bold capital letters, was the reason. It was the sentence that every payroll professional fears but every auditor loves. It was the sentence that meant the system had realized a mistake from the past and was correcting it with zero mercy. The screen read, "Retro adjustment, overpay recovery." People often mistake my job for accounting, but that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the corporate ecosystem. Accounting looks backward at what has already happened to categorize the money we spent. Payroll is the active artery that keeps the organism alive right now. I am not a mathematician, and I am not a data entry clerk. I am a dam operator. My entire existence is dedicated to holding back a chaotic flood of regulations, tax codes, and human errors so that 900 employees at Brighthaven Medical Logistics do not wake up on a Friday morning with empty bank accounts and a desire to burn the building down. If I do my job perfectly, I am invisible. The only time people learn my name is when the dam breaks. To understand why Grant Hollis was destined to fail, you have to understand the beast we keep in the server room. We call it Paylattice. It is our internal human resources information system, and it is not a friendly piece of software you can download from an app store. It is a custom-built monstrosity designed to handle the logistical nightmare of our business model. Brighthaven is not a 9-to-5 office where everyone gets a flat salary. We are a logistics company. We have long-haul drivers who accrue mileage reimbursement that varies based on the price of fuel in the state they are driving through. We have warehouse loaders who work split shifts, which triggers a complex night differential pay rate. We have sales representatives on a draw against commission structure and per diem rates for travel that change based on federal guidelines. Paylattice sits in the middle of all this like a spider in a web. It pulls data from the electronic timekeeping clocks. It pulls expense reports from the finance module. It pulls tax updates from the federal and state databases. If one single rule is configured incorrectly, the entire system dominoes. A driver might get paid for 25 hours of driving time when they were actually sleeping, or a warehouse worker might get taxed at a California rate while working in Texas. I spent 3 years taming Paylattice. I remember the panic 2 years ago when the city of Dallas changed a local tax ordinance regarding commuter benefits. The system did not catch the update automatically. If I had simply pushed the button like Lyle wanted, the company would have underwithheld taxes for 300 people. We would have been hit with a fine of nearly $40,000 plus interest. I caught it because I do not trust software. I caught it because I manually verify the tax tables against the city website before every single run. That is the difference between a payroll manager and a payroll processor. A processor trusts the screen. A manager trusts nothing. My routine was sacred. I called it the 3-layer reconciliation. First, I verified the time cards against the schedule to ensure nobody was clocking in for a shift that did not exist. Second, I verified the pay register against the time cards to ensure the math on the gross pay was correct. Third, and most importantly, I verified the bank file against the pay register. This is the step most people skip because it is tedious. It involves looking at the raw data file that goes to the bank, a meaningless wall of text and numbers, and ensuring the total cash leaving the company matches exactly what the payroll report says down to the penny. If the register says $1 million and the bank file says $1,000,001, I do not go home until I find that penny. But Lyle Harrington did not care about pennies. He cared about the slide deck he presented to the board of directors. Our CEO is a decent man, but he is perpetually absent traveling to secure new contracts and leaving the operational details to his lieutenants. That left Lyle as the king of the castle. Lyle viewed the finance department as a factory. If he could replace a human worker with a cheaper machine or a cheaper human, he would do it without hesitation. He did not see the nights I stayed late to fix a glitch in the overtime calculation for the warehouse team. He only saw my salary line item and decided it was too heavy. The transition period was a farce. After the meeting where they eliminated my role, they asked me to stay for 2 weeks to transfer my knowledge to Grant. It is impossible to transfer 15 years of instinct in 10 business days, but I went through the motions because I am a professional. I created a folder on the shared drive labeled Transition Documents. I filled it with process maps, contact lists for our tax vendors, and the calendar of critical filing dates. Grant spent most of those 2 weeks texting on his phone or interrupting me to ask why we did not just use a cheaper cloud-based startup app he had seen on social media. "This interface looks like it is from the 90s, Grant said on his third day, pointing at the Pay Lattice command screen. "Why are there so many manual checkpoints? We can script this. I can write a Python script to bypass these approval clicks. Those clicks are not there for fun," I told him, trying to keep my voice even. "Each click is a digital signature. It proves that a human being reviewed the batch totals. If we get audited, the auditors look for those timestamps. If they see a script ran it automatically, they will fail us on internal controls." Grant just shrugged. "That sounds like fear-mongering. Efficiency is key. Brooklyn, you are overthinking it." I stopped arguing. I realized then that I was not training a successor. I was training a demolition expert who did not know he was holding a hammer. However, there was one specific aspect of the handover that I handled with extreme precision. It concerned the administrative access rights. In Pay Lattice, there are different levels of power. There is the viewer level, which most HR staff have. There is the administrator level, which allows you to process payroll and edit employee data. And then there is the configuration level. We call it the God mode. The configuration level allows you to create new types of income, change the tax logic, and override the hard-coded safety rails of the system. During my exit interview with the IT director, I made a very specific request. "I need you to terminate my user ID effectively immediately at 5 p.m. on my last day," I said. "And I need you to document exactly what access rights are being provisioned for Grant." "He is taking your spot," the IT director said. "So we will just mirror your profile." "No," I said firmly. "My profile includes legacy configuration rights because I helped build the system. Grant is a new hire. According to the Sarbanes-Oxley compliance protocols, a new payroll administrator should not have configuration rights until they have passed a probationary period. He should only have processing rights. If he needs to create a new earning code or change a tax formula, he should have to submit a ticket to IT or have the CFO approve it explicitly. I was protecting the company, but I was also protecting myself. I did not want Grant to break the system on his first day and then claim that I had left it broken. I wanted a clean line in the sand. The IT director agreed. It was standard protocol after all, even if we had been lax about it in the past. So on my final afternoon, I sat next to Grant and watched him log in with his own credentials. I checked his screen. The configuration tab was grayed out. He could run payroll. He could edit time cards. But he could not rewrite the laws of the system. "Hey," Grant said, frowning at the screen. "Why can't I access the back-end setup? How am I supposed to optimize the tax tables if I can't get in there?" "You do not need to optimize the tax tables," I said while packing the last of my pens. "The tax tables are federal law. You do not touch them. If you need to change a system rule, you go through IT. It is a safety control." Grant rolled his eyes. "Bureaucracy. Fine. I will get Lyle to unlock it next week. I cannot work with one hand tied behind my back." I looked at him one last time. He was 29 years old and wearing a suit that was too shiny. He thought Payroll was a video game where you just needed to find the cheat codes to win. He did not understand that Payroll is not data entry. Payroll is compliance. It is the art of following rules so strict that people go to prison for breaking them. "Good luck, Grant," I said. He did not look up from his phone. "Yeah, thanks. I got this." I walked out of the building into the humid Texas heat. I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I knew the specific weaknesses of the Pay Lattice system. I knew that without the 3-layer reconciliation errors would start to creep in like termites. A missed decimal point here, a wrong shift code there, and I knew that Grant's arrogance would prevent him from asking for help until the water was already over his head. What I did not know was how fast he would try to break the rules I had just warned him about. I thought it would take 6 months. I was wrong. He was going to try to prove he was smarter than the system in his very first quarter, and he was going to find out that while you can bullshit a CFO, you cannot bullshit a general ledger. The first time Grant Hollis truly showed his hand was on a Tuesday morning in the middle of the open plan HR suite. He was wearing a brand new puffer vest over a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. It was the uniform of every tech startup founder I had ever seen on the news, and he wore it like armor. He did not walk through the department. He patrolled it. He stopped at desks to drop buzzwords like they were candy wrappers. I heard him tell the benefits coordinator that we needed to pivot toward a more agile wellness ecosystem. I heard him tell the recruiter that her time to hire metrics needed more granular visibility. It was all noise. It was the sound of a man who did not know how the engine worked but wanted to repaint the hood. I was at my desk archiving the last of the quarterly tax filings when he stopped in front of me. He did not knock on the partition. He just cleared his throat loudly enough to make Elaine, the HR director, look up from her office across the hall. "Hey, Brooklyn," Grant said. His voice carried. He wanted an audience. "I am trying to get into the back end of PayLattice to run a script for the new earning codes. I need the admin master password. The one you use for the hard overrides." I turned my chair slowly. "Grant, we went over this. There is no master password that I can just give you. My access is tied to my biometric login and my specific user ID, which IT is deactivating on Friday. If you need administrative privileges for a specific task, you have to submit a ticket to the IT help desk. They will provision your account based on the approval workflow." Grant laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that was meant to be disarming but felt condescending. "Come on. The payroll lady does not need to be the gatekeeper anymore. We are all on the same team. I am just trying to streamline the onboarding. If I wait for a T to process a ticket, I lose half a day of productivity. Just write it down for me." The room went quiet. He had called me the payroll lady. He had reduced 15 years of forensic accounting and compliance management to a title that sounded like I pushed a cart around serving tea. I saw Elaine wince in her office, but she did not intervene. This was the new culture Lyle Harrington wanted, young and fast and cheap. "I cannot write it down, Grant, because that violates the security policy," I said, keeping my voice level. "And frankly, you should not be running scripts in the production environment on a Tuesday. We process payroll on Wednesday. If you corrupt a table now, we will not have time to restore the backup before the direct deposit file needs to go to the bank." Grant shook his head and looked around the room as if inviting everyone else to witness my obstinance. "You are really making this difficult just to prove you are necessary, aren't you? It is fine. I will get Lyle to override it. We need to move fast, not hide behind red tape." He walked away, tapping on his tablet. He thought I was hoarding power. He did not understand that I was hoarding safety. Later that afternoon, I saw the first tangible evidence of his genius improvements. I was clearing out my personal files when Grant waved me over to his desk. He looked proud. He pointed to his screen where the PayLattice configuration menu was open. "Look at this," he said. "I cleaned up the earning codes. There were too many items in the drop-down menu. It was clutter. I consolidated them." I leaned in and felt my stomach drop. "What did you consolidate?" "Well, take the night shift differential," he said. "We had 3 different codes for night shift 1 and night shift 2 and weekend night. It is all just extra money, right? So I just merged them into the base hourly rate for those employees. It saves the managers from having to select a code every time. Much leaner." I stared at him. "Grant, you cannot do that. The night shift differential is a separate earning line because it is taxed differently in certain jurisdictions, and it does not count toward the base rate for annual raises. If you merge it into their base pay, you are permanently raising their salary floor. When they work a day shift, they will still get the night rate. You are going to overpay them significantly." He waved a hand dismissively. I adjusted the logic. It will wash out in the end. Besides, if it is a little high, it boosts morale. We call that a retention strategy. "That is not a strategy," I said. "That is unauthorized compensation, and it ruins the historical data for the Department of Labor audits. You just destroyed the ability to track shift costs separately." "You worry too much," Grant said, turning back to his keyboard. "It is just data. We can reclassify it later if the auditors get fussy." I walked away because there was nothing else to say. He was not just painting over the cracks. He was removing the load-bearing walls because he thought they blocked the view. I decided to take my lunch break late to avoid the rush. I went to the small deli around the corner where Jenna Pike usually ate. Jenna was a senior accountant at Brighthaven. and one of the few people who understood exactly what I did. She was sitting in the back booth nursing an iced tea. When she saw me, she moved her bag to make room. "You look like you just watched a murder," Jenna said. "I watched a suicide," I corrected her. "He is merging differential pay into base rates. He thinks it is cleaner." Jenna closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Oh no, that is going to mess up my general ledger mapping. I am going to have variances in every single department cost center." "He does not care," I said. "He called me the payroll lady today." Jenna sighed. She looked around to make sure we were alone, then lowered her voice. "You want to know the worst part? I was in a budget meeting with Lyle Harrington this morning. He was glowing. He actually put a slide up showing the projected savings for the G&A expenses." "Let me guess," I said. $70,000, Jenna whispered. "He told the other executives that by replacing a legacy manager with a tech-enabled specialist, he is saving the company $70,000 a year in salary and benefits. He called it a strategic realignment of resources." $70,000. That was the price tag they put on my experience. They thought they were saving $70,000, but I knew they were about to spend twice that in penalties and cleanup costs. It was insulting, but it was also clarifying. I realized then that I did not owe them anything anymore. I did not owe them a warning. I did not owe them a safety net. I went back to the office for the final hour of my day. Grant was still clicking away at his keyboard, confident in his destruction. I stopped by his desk one last time to hand over the physical key to the file cabinet that held the paper checks, the emergency stock we only used when the electronic system failed. "Here is the key," I said. "Do not lose it. If the power goes out or the bank link goes down, these are the only way people get paid." Grant took the key without looking up. "Thanks, but we won't need paper. I am moving everything to digital wallets eventually. Paper is obsolete." "Grant," I said, pausing. "Payroll is not about the medium. It is about precision. If you are off by a decimal point, you affect someone's rent payment." He finally looked at me. There was a smirk playing on his lips. "Brooklyn, you need to relax. If payroll is wrong a little, then we fix it the next cycle. It is not brain surgery. Nobody dies if they get $20 less this week. We just make it up later." I felt a chill go down my spine. If payroll is wrong a little, that was the sentence that proved he was dangerous. In my world, you are never wrong a little. You are either right or you are negligent. I returned to my desk to log out for the last time. As I was shutting down my computer, I saw an email notification pop up on the shared screen that Grant and I still had mirrored access to. It was a system alert from the HR ticketing system. Grant had submitted a high-priority request to the IT department. The subject line read, "Urgent. Access request. One-time payment override." My hand hovered over the mouse. The one-time payment override function is the nuclear option. It allows an administrator to force a payment through the system without any of the standard validations. It bypasses the tax engine. It bypasses the deduction logic. It is a tool that should only be used in catastrophic emergencies, like a court-ordered settlement that needs to be paid instantly. I clicked on the preview pane to see the justification Grant had written. Reason for request: operational emergency. Need to bypass legacy blocks to streamline executive compensation adjustment. He was lying. There was no operational emergency. He was trying to force a payment that the system was rejecting. The system was rejecting it because it broke a rule, likely a tax rule or a limit on how much can be paid in a single cycle. Instead of investigating why the red flag was waving, Grant wanted to cut the flag down. I could have called Lyle. I could have walked into Elaine's office and explained that Grant was about to commit financial malpractice. I could have stopped it. But then I remembered the $70,000. I remembered the payroll lady. I remembered him saying that nobody dies if the math is wrong. I moved my mouse to the sign out button. I did not print the email. I did not forward it. I simply let the screen go black. I picked up my purse and walked out of Brighthaven Medical Logistics. Grant Hollis wanted full control. He wanted to be the pilot. Well, he just turned off the autopilot and flew straight into a storm. I hoped he had a parachute because I certainly wasn't going to pack one for him. The first week of my unemployment was quiet. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy like the air before a thunderstorm. I spent my mornings drinking coffee on my porch and resisting the urge to check my email. I knew that my access was revoked. I knew that my user ID was dead, but the muscle memory of 15 years does not vanish overnight. My fingers still twitched at 8 in the morning wanting to run the daily validation report. I had to remind myself that it was not my problem anymore. I had to remind myself that Brighthaven Medical Logistics had decided I was an overpriced relic. But by the second week, the silence broke. It did not break with an explosion. It broke with the steady, dripping sound of incompetence. It started with a text message from Sarah, who managed the swing shift in the warehouse. Sarah is a single mother of 2 who tracks her hours down to the minute because every cent matters to her. Brooklyn, the text read, I am sorry to bother you, but who do I talk to about my overtime? I worked 52 hours last week, but my stub only shows 40. I asked the new guy, and he said the system is calibrating. I stared at the phone. Calibrating. That is not a payroll term. That is a word you use when you are stalling because you do not know which button to push. In PayLattice, overtime is calculated automatically based on the state labor laws programmed into the back end. If the system did not pay the overtime, it meant someone had messed with the time card import file. Or worse, someone had manually overridden the calculation to suppress the cost. I replied carefully, I cannot help you, Sarah, because I do not work there anymore. You need to file a formal ticket with HR. Keep a copy of your time card. She replied instantly, he told the team that you left the system in a mess. He said he is cleaning up your legacy errors, and we just have to be patient until the next cycle. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. Grant was not just failing. He was using my name as a shield for his failure. He was blaming the architect for the fact that he was setting the house on fire. Over the next few days, the trickle turned into a stream. I heard from a driver who was missing his mileage reimbursement. I heard from a sales rep whose commission check was short by $300. The pattern was identical in every case. They would go to Grant. Grant would roll his eyes and talk about legacy data corruption or optimization glitches. Then he would tell them the most dangerous lie in the corporate world. He would tell them to wait for the next cycle. In payroll, you never tell a worker to wait. If you owe them money, you cut a manual check that day. You do not ask people to pay their rent with patience. On Thursday afternoon, I agreed to meet Mike for coffee. Mike is the night operations manager. He has been with Brighthaven for 20 years, and he has zero tolerance for nonsense. We met at a diner 3 blocks away from the office so nobody would see us. Mike looked tired. He looked like a man who was watching his ship sink slowly. It is a circus in there, Brooklyn, Mike said, stirring sugar into his black coffee. The drivers are threatening to unionize. Grant walks around with that tablet like he is Steve Jobs, but he cannot answer a simple question about tax withholding. He told one of my guys that the tax tables are fluid. Fluid. Can you believe that? He is drowning Mike, I said. He does not know the difference between a deduction and a garnishment. Mike leaned in closer and lowered his voice. It is not just that he is incompetent. He is arrogant. Last night he was in the break room getting coffee while I was doing the shift change. He was bragging to one of the younger HR assistants. He was talking about how low his salary is compared to what you were making. I raised an eyebrow. He took the job knowing the rate. Yeah, well, he does not seem happy about it, Mike said. He told the assistant that smart people find ways to balance the equation. He said, and I quote, I have a way to optimize my own package to make up for the shortfall. He called it a performance incentive that he authorized for himself. My blood ran cold. He said he authorized it for himself. I asked. That is what he said, Mike confirmed. He acted like he was a genius for finding a loophole. He thinks he is Robin Hood, but he is stealing from the sheriff. I drove home with my mind racing. Grant was not just making mistakes, he was stealing, or at least he was manipulating the system to pay himself money he had not earned. I thought back to the email I saw on my last day, the urgent request for the one-time payment override. He had used the excuse of an operational emergency. If he had used that override to pay himself a bonus or a stipend, He had bypassed every single approval layer in the company. I walked into my home office and opened my personal laptop. I did not try to log into the company server. That would be illegal, and I am not a criminal. I am an auditor at heart. I opened the folder where I had saved the PDF copies of every single email I sent during my transition period. I found the one I was looking for. It was dated 2 days before my departure. The subject line was Security Protocol, SOX Readiness, and Audit Log Preservation. I had sent it to the IT director and copied the legal department. In the email, I had explicitly stated, as part of the handover, please ensure that all audit logs regarding system configuration changes are set to permanent retention. Furthermore, please confirm that any changes to the administrator's personal pay profile must trigger an automatic alert to the CFO. I had sent that email because I knew Grant was reckless. I wanted a paper trail that proved I had warned them. I wanted proof that if the safety rails were removed, it was not my decision. I read the email again. It was my exoneration. If Grant had turned off the alerts or deleted the logs, there would be a record of that deletion. And if he hadn't deleted them, then his name was stamped on every fraudulent transaction. I was not going to call the police. Not yet. I was not going to call the CEO. I was going to wait. In my experience, you do not interrupt an enemy when he is digging his own grave. You wait until he is deep enough that he cannot climb out. Then the phone rang. It was Jenna Pike from accounting. I picked up, and before I could even say hello, Jenna spoke. Her voice was shaking. Jenna never shakes. She is the kind of accountant who finds a missing nickel in $1 million ledger and celebrates. But today she sounded terrified. "Brooklyn," she said. "Are you alone?" "I am," I said. "What is wrong?" "I am doing the bank reconciliation for the mid-month check run." Jenna said, "The general ledger shows that we paid out $450,000 in total payroll expenses. That matches the summary report that Grant sent me." "Okay," I said. "So it balances?" "No," Jenna said. "It does not balance. I looked at the actual cash withdrawal from the corporate operating account. The bank statement shows a withdrawal of $455,000. I sat down. $5,000. There is a $5,000 variance. "Yes," Jenna whispered, "and it is not a calculation error." I drilled down into the batch file. The money left the building, Brooklyn. But it is not on the payroll register. It is like a ghost payment. It bypassed the report, but it hit the bank. "Grant," I said. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. "I think he is paying himself or someone else off the books," Jenna said. "He must have used a manual override to cut a direct deposit that doesn't print on the standard register. Brooklyn, he is embezzling, and he is doing it badly." "He is not doing it badly," I said, looking at my SOX Readiness email on the screen. "He is doing it catastrophically. He thinks because the register matches the GL that nobody will look at the bank cash flow. He thinks accounting is just data entry too." "What do I do?" Jenna asked. "If I report this to Lyle, he might try to bury it. Lyle hired him. Lyle will look like an idiot." "You do not report it to Lyle yet," I said firmly. "You document it. You print the bank statement. You print the payroll register. You highlight the variance in yellow marker. And you wait." "Wait for what?" Jenna asked. "Wait for the month-end close," I said. "Wait until he does it again, because he will do it again. People like Grant do not stop at $5,000. Once they see the money hit their account, they get greedy. He will try to take more, and when he does, we will have him on 2 counts instead of 1. I hung up the phone. Outside, the sun was setting over Dallas. I took a deep breath. Grant Hollis had made a fatal mistake. He had assumed that because he had the keys to the car, he knew how to drive. He did not realize that the car had a black box recorder. And he definitely did not realize that the mechanic he fired was still holding the manual. The one-time payment override was not just a tool, it was a trap, and Grant had just stepped right into it with both feet. The parking lot of the Target off Interstate 63 was the only place Jenna felt safe enough to meet. It was raining a slow and miserable Texas drizzle that made the asphalt shine under the orange streetlights. I pulled my sedan next to her silver SUV and climbed into her passenger seat. The air inside her car smelled of vanilla air freshener and nervous sweat. Jenna Pike was a good accountant. She followed the rules. She colored inside the lines, and right now she looked like she was about to be sick. I printed the general ledger summary, Jenna said without saying hello. She handed me a thick stack of paper clipped together. Her hands were shaking slightly. I did not export it to Excel because I did not want to leave a digital footprint of me downloading the raw data. This is just the standard monthly expense report that gets distributed to the finance team. Anyone could have looked at it, but nobody looks at it, I said, flipping on the map light. That is what Grant is banking on. Nobody reads the dictionary until they need to look up a word. I scanned the columns. I did not need a calculator. I have been looking at Brighthaven's financial anatomy for so long that I can feel when a bone is broken. I looked at the totals for the month. Here's the problem, I said, pointing to the bottom line. Our headcount is down by 4%. I left. 2 senior drivers retired. A warehouse supervisor quit. We replaced them with junior staff or nobody at all. The payroll expense should have dropped by at least $40,000 this month. Look at the actuals, Jenna whispered. I looked. The total payroll expense had not dropped. It had increased by $6,000. That is a mathematical impossibility, I said. Unless we gave everyone a raise, which we certainly did not do. Turn to page 4, Jenna said. Look at the executive allowance code. I flipped the page. My finger traced the line items. Base pay, overtime, commission, and there it was, a line item that usually sat at 0 unless we were relocating a new vice president from out of state, temporary transition stipend. The amount was exactly $2,500 per pay period, $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year. Who is receiving this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The report aggregates by department, Jenna said. This is charged to the General and Administrative Cost Center. That is the cost center for HR and payroll. It is Grant, I said. He is paying himself a transition stipend. He is treating himself like a relocated executive every single 2 weeks. I sat back in the seat and let the audacity of it wash over me. A transition stipend is a specific tool. It is meant to cover temporary housing or moving trucks for 30 or 60 days max. It requires a signed contract addendum. It requires the approval of the Human Resources Director and the Chief Financial Officer. It is not something you just turn on like a light switch. How did he bypass the approval workflow? I asked. PayLattice has a hard stop. You cannot attach that code to an employee profile without an authorized digital signature from the CFO. Jenna reached into her back seat and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of an email chain. I found this attached to the journal entry in the finance drive, Jenna said. He uploaded it as his supporting documentation. I took the paper. The subject line was, Quick Verify on Transition Setup. The email from Grant to Lyle Harrington was a masterclass in obfuscation. It was long and rambling, filled with technical jargon about market adjustments and temporary bridge gaps for operational excellence. Buried in the third paragraph was a sentence that said, I will apply the standard transition logic to the admin profile to ensure continuity during the handover. He did not mention money. He did not mention a dollar amount. He made it sound like a software setting, and Lyle Harrington, the man who wanted to save money so badly he fired me, had replied from his iPhone. His response was 2 letters, okay. That is it, I asked. That is his approval. That is what Grant used, Jenna said. He took that okay and forwarded it to himself, then attached it to the transaction as CFO approval. He bypassed the formal form. He bypassed the HR signature. He used a vague email from a distracted boss to give himself a $60,000 raise. It is brilliant in a stupid way, I said. If he gets caught, he will say he had approval. He will say Lyle authorized it. He is banking on Lyle being too embarrassed to admit he did not read the email. But it is fraud, Jenna said. It is theft. He is taking money that was not in his offer letter. What do we do? Do I go to Lyle? No, I said sharply. If you go to Lyle, he will panic. He might cover it up to save his own skin. He might fire you for digging into the transaction details. We need to go around them. We need to go to the people who do not care about feelings or careers. We need to go to internal audit. Audit is scary, Jenna said. Audit is a weapon, I corrected her. And right now, we are going to pull the trigger. I pulled a notepad from my purse. We are not going to hack the system. We are not going to use my old passwords. We are going to submit a formal whistleblower tip using the public data you just showed me. We are going to be clinical. We spent the next 20 minutes drafting the text. We did not use emotional language. We did not use the word steal. We simply pointed out the accounting anomaly. To the Internal Audit Committee. A review of the monthly general ledger indicates a material variance in the general and administrative cost center. Specifically, the temporary transition stipend line item shows recurring activity despite no known executive relocations. The supporting documentation attached to these transactions appears to lack the standard dual signature authorization required by company policy. Recommended action: full reconciliation of the payroll batch against the employment contracts. Jenna typed it into the anonymous tip portal on her phone. Her thumb hovered over the submit button. Do it, I said. She pressed the button. A green checkmark appeared on the screen. Submission received. Now what? Jenna asked. Now we wait. I said. Internal audit is not fast, but they are thorough. Once a ticket is in the system, they have a legal obligation to investigate it. They cannot delete it. They cannot ignore it. If they ignore it, they become liable. 2 days later, Jenna called me during her lunch break. She sounded frustrated. I got a generic response from the audit inbox, she said. They said, "Thank you for your submission. We have logged this item and will review it during the standard quarterly close process. That is 6 weeks away. Brooklyn, he is going to steal another $7,000 by then." I smiled. I was standing in my kitchen making a sandwich, and for the first time in months I felt completely at peace. Jenna saw a delay. I saw a trap sealing shut. Jenna, I said softly, you are thinking like an employee. You need to think like an avenger. If they stopped him today, he would just be reprimanded. He would say it was a misunderstanding. He would say he thought the okay meant he could pay himself. So we let him run, I said. Every single paycheck he collects between now and the quarter close is another nail in the coffin. 1 payment is a mistake. 6 payments is a pattern. By the time audit opens that file in 6 weeks, the amount he has taken will be grand larceny. It won't be an HR issue anymore. It will be a felony. You want him to steal more? Jenna asked, her voice quiet. I do not want him to steal, I said. But if he is going to steal, I want him to steal enough that he can never work in finance again. Let him feel safe. Let him think nobody is watching. Let him spend that money. Because when the clawback comes, it is going to take everything. You are scary, Jenna said. I am not scary, I replied. I am just reconciling the account, and right now the balance is still in his favor. But the adjustment is coming. I hung up the phone. I looked at the calendar on my wall. The quarter close was 45 days away. 45 days of Grant Hollis walking around that office thinking he was the smartest man in the room. 45 days of him spending money that wasn't his. He had insulted the system. He had treated the audit trail like a suggestion. He was about to learn that the system has a very long memory and absolutely no sense of humor. The red flag was already waving. He just was not looking in the right direction to see it. To keep my sanity intact, and to prove to myself that I was not a woman obsessed with the downfall of a 29-year-old man. I took a freelance contract. It was a short consulting gig for a regional trucking company in Fort Worth that needed to migrate their timekeeping system. It was boring work. It was tedious work. And it was exactly what I needed. It reminded me that the market still valued my skills, even if Brighthaven did not. I spent my days mapping data fields and my evenings drinking tea, deliberately not looking at the Brighthaven LinkedIn page. I wanted to be clean. I wanted to be able to stand in front of a judge or a hiring manager and say that I moved on the moment I walked out the door. But you cannot truly leave a place like Brighthaven until the paperwork is finished. And the paperwork was just getting started. The first sign that the internal audit team had woken up came 3 weeks after Jenna submitted the tip. It did not come to me directly. It went to Elaine Porter, the HR director. Elaine was a woman who viewed any disruption to her day as a personal insult. She liked quiet compliance and steady metrics. The arrival of auditors asking specific questions about system configuration was her worst nightmare. I was sitting in my home office reviewing a spreadsheet for my new client when my phone rang. It was Elaine. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I needed to sound busy. I needed to sound like Brighthaven was a distant memory. "Hello, Elaine," I said, keeping my voice bright and professional. "Brooklyn," she said. She did not waste time with pleasantries. Her voice was tight, the vocal equivalent of a clenched jaw. "I have a team from internal audit sitting in my conference room. They are asking questions about the administrator access protocols in PayLattice. They seem to think there are some irregularities in how the earning codes were set up before you left." I leaned back in my chair. There it was. The attempt to shift the narrative. Grant was likely feeling the heat and pointing his finger backward. "I am not sure what you mean by irregularities," I said calmly. "I followed the standard offboarding checklist. Every code I created was documented in the operations manual." "Well," Elaine sighed, the sound of a woman who had not slept well. "They are asking who turned on the override permissions. Grant is insisting that the system was already configured that way when he inherited it. He says he just continued using the legacy settings you established. He is implying that you left a back door open." Brooklyn. It was a clumsy lie. It was the kind of lie a child tells when they break a vase, claiming it fell on its own. But in the corporate world, if you repeat a lie loud enough and the person who knows the truth is not there to defend themselves, it can become a fact. "Elaine," I said, "check your inbox. I am sending you something right now." I opened my email archive. I found the email I had saved, the one with the subject line Security Protocol, SOX Readiness, and Audit Log Preservation. It was the email I had sent to the IT director and copied to Elaine on my final day. It contained the time-stamped confirmation from IT that my user ID had been terminated and stripped of all rights at exactly 5 p.m. on my last Friday. It also contained the screenshot of Grant's profile as it existed at that moment, showing he had limited access. I hit forward. "I just sent you the chain of custody," I said. If the settings were changed, they were changed after 5 o'clock on my last day, and since I was escorted out of the building and my badge was deactivated, I certainly did not do it. The audit logs will show the user ID of the person who made the changes. I suggest you ask the auditors to pull the metadata. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear papers shuffling. "I see it," Elaine said softly. "The IT confirmation is here. You were locked out." "I was," I confirmed. "So, if Grant is saying I left a door open, he is lying, or he does not know how to read a system log. Either way, it is not my problem." Elaine hung up without saying goodbye. She was not angry at me. She was angry because she realized she was standing in the blast zone, and I had just handed her a bomb defusal manual that proved the bomb was built by her new favorite employee. 2 days later, Jenna called me with the update. The investigation had taken a turn. Internal audit had done exactly what I suggested. They pulled the metadata, and what they found was not just a one-time approval error, it was a systemic alteration of the safety rules. "You are not going to believe this," Jenna said. She sounded giddy. "Audit found a change in the approval workflow engine. You know how any payment over $1,000 requires a secondary sign-off?" "Of course," I said. "That is the golden rule." "Grant changed the threshold," Jenna said. "He went into the back-end configuration and changed the secondary approval limit from $1,000 to $5,000. He did it in his second week. He created a window where he could process payments up to $4,999 without triggering a notification to Lyle or Elaine." My jaw tightened. That was not an accident. That was not optimization. That was premeditated embezzlement. He had widened the net so he could swim through it. "He created a blind spot," I said. He made sure his transition stipend would fly under the radar. He knew exactly what he was doing. But here is the thing, Jenna continued. Grant knows audit is looking. He saw them pulling the logs, and he is freaking out. He went into a meeting with Lyle this morning and started shouting. He is claiming that the system is glitching because of your old custom scripts. He told Lyle that the only reason the threshold changed is because your old code corrupted the update. He is desperate, I said. He is throwing everything at the wall. He is demanding that you come back, Jenna said. He told Lyle that the company needs to bring you in as a consultant to fix the mess you left and explain the architecture. He wants to get you in the room so he can bully you into taking the blame. He thinks if he talks fast enough and uses enough technical words, he can confuse Lyle into thinking this is a software error and not a crime. I closed my eyes and smiled. It was the moment I had been waiting for. Grant wanted a confrontation. He wanted to bring me onto his turf, believing he could outmaneuver the tired old payroll lady. He did not realize that by inviting me back, he was giving me the opportunity to close the steel trap around his leg. Did they call you? Jenna asked. Not yet, I said. But they will. The call came an hour later. It was not Elaine this time. It was the corporate legal counsel, a man named Robert Sterling. I had worked with Robert on a few garnishment cases. He was a sharp man who did not like surprises. Ms. Flores, Robert said. We have a situation with the payroll system configuration. Mr. Hollis indicates that there are legacy script errors causing compliance issues. He has requested your presence to assist in a root cause analysis meeting. I am sure he has, I said, but I am no longer an employee. Robert, I have no obligation to assist. We are willing to pay your consulting rate, Robert said. We just need to clear this up. Lyle is concerned about the integrity of the ledger. I paused. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds. I wanted them to sweat. I will come, I said finally. But I have conditions. Name them, Robert said. I will attend one meeting, I said. 1. I will not touch a keyboard. I will not log into the system. I will answer questions based on my knowledge of the architecture I built. But I require that the meeting be recorded. I want the HR director present. I want the head of internal audit present. And I want the minutes to be signed by everyone in the room. That seems formal, Robert noted. It is a compliance issue, I said. You know how much I love compliance. Robert agreed. He set the meeting for Friday morning, 2 days before the next payroll run. I hung up the phone and looked at my reflection in the dark monitor of my computer. Grant Hollis had made his final mistake. He thought he could use this meeting to frame me. He thought he could scream about glitches and legacy code, and I would crumble. He did not know that I was not coming to defend myself. I was coming to testify. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I did not prepare code. I did not prepare slides. I prepared a timeline. I printed out the email confirmation of my lockout. I printed out the standard operating procedure for the approval workflow that I had written 3 years ago. I printed out the Sarbanes-Oxley guidelines on segregation of duties. I was going to walk into that room with nothing but paper and the truth. Grant was going to walk in with lies and a tablet. Friday morning arrived with a gray sky. I put on my best suit, a charcoal blazer that made me look like an executioner. I drove to the Brighthaven office and parked in the visitor lot. I looked up at the glass building where I had spent 15 years of my life. It looked the same, but it felt different. It was not my home anymore. It was a crime scene. I walked to the reception desk. The receptionist, a young girl named Chloe who had always liked me, widened her eyes when she saw me. "Brooklyn," she whispered. "Grant is in a mood. He has been yelling at the screen all morning." "Do not worry, Chloe," I said, signing the visitor log. "I am just here to help him read the data." I walked toward the conference room. I could see them through the glass wall. Lyle was there, looking nervous and checking his watch. Elaine was there, arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. A woman I recognized from internal audit sat at the end of the table with a laptop open, and Grant was standing at the whiteboard, drawing complex diagrams with a red marker, looking frantic and energized. He looked up as I opened the door. His eyes were wild. He looked like a man who had been awake for 3 days trying to solve a puzzle that had no solution. "Finally," Grant said, capping the marker with an aggressive click. The architect returns to the scene of the crash. I did not smile. I did not shake hands. I walked to the empty chair opposite him, placed my folder on the table, and sat down. "I am here, Grant," I said. "Tell me about this glitch." The room went silent. The air pressure dropped. The trap was set. All he had to do was step on the trigger. Grant Hollis did not waste a second. The moment I sat down, he launched into a performance that deserved an Academy Award. He paced back and forth in front of the whiteboard, pointing at a chaotic diagram of servers and data flows. He was sweating. A thin sheen of perspiration coated his forehead, and his hands moved with a jerky, frantic energy. "The issue," Grant declared, his voice pitching higher than usual, "is that Brooklyn hard-coded a series of legacy scripts into the Pay Lattice kernel. When I tried to implement the new lean optimization protocols, the system conflicted. It is classic technical debt. She built a labyrinth and took the map with her. Now the system is throwing random variances because it cannot handle modern logic." He looked at Lyle Harrington, who was nodding slowly, desperate to believe that this was a technical problem and not a management failure. "So you are saying," Lyle asked, "that the financial discrepancies we are seeing are just glitches, phantom data?" "Exactly," Grant said, slamming his hand on the table. "It is bad code. The system is misclassifying entries. It is creating noise in the general ledger. I have been working 18-hour days trying to untangle her mess." He looked at me with a mix of triumph and accusation. He thought he had won. He thought that by drowning the room in jargon, he could scare them away from the truth. I did not look at his whiteboard. I did not look at Lyle. I looked directly at the woman from internal audit. Her name was Sarah, and she had not blinked once since the meeting started. She had her laptop open and was watching Grant with the cold, detached interest of a biologist observing a virus. I opened my folder. I took out a single sheet of blank paper and a pen. "Grant," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his monologue like a knife. "I am not here to discuss kernel scripts or optimization protocols. I am here to help you read the data, and the data is very simple." "It is not simple," Grant snapped. "It is a complex relational database. It is arithmetic," I corrected him. "And I have 3 questions for you. Just 3. Grant crossed his arms. "Go ahead. Ask your legacy questions." "Question 1, I said, holding up a finger. "Who created the earning code labeled Transition Stipend in the System Configuration menu?" Grant froze. His eyes flickered to Lyle, then back to me. That was an auto-generated code. The system created it during the migration. Pay Lattice does not auto-generate earning codes," I said. "That is impossible. It requires a manual entry." I turned to Sarah. "Does the system log show an auto-generation event?" Sarah typed on her keyboard. The click-clack sound was deafening in the silent room. "No," Sarah said. Her voice was flat. "The log shows the code was manually created on October 14th at 9:45 in the morning. The user ID associated with the creation is G. Hollis." Grant turned pale. I had to recreate it because the old one was corrupted. It was a maintenance task." "Question 2, I continued, raising a second finger. "Who enabled the override function that allows payments under $5,000 to bypass the secondary approval workflow?" "That is a system default," Grant shouted. "The update reset the defaults." "No," I said. "The default is $1,000. It has been $1,000 for 7 years. I wrote the policy myself." I looked at Sarah again. Sarah did not even need to type this time. She looked at a report on her screen. The configuration change was made on October 20th. The user ID was G. Hollis. The changelog comment field was left blank. Grant was breathing hard now. He looked like a cornered animal. Lyle was staring at him with a dawning look of horror. "Question 3, I said, raising my third finger. "Why has the total payroll expense for the general and administrative department increased by $6,000 a month when the headcount in that department decreased by one person. "It is mapping," Grant yelled. He pointed at the whiteboard again. "I told you, the system is mapping the warehouse costs to the wrong center. It is a glitch." I reached into my folder and pulled out the bank reconciliation summary that Jenna had given me. I slid it across the table toward Lyle. "Lyle," I said, "banks do not know what mapping is. Banks do not care about cost centers or glitches. Banks only care about cash. This document shows that cash real American dollars left the company account and went into a specific direct deposit account. It didn't get mapped to a glitch. It got deposited." Lyle picked up the paper. His hands were shaking. This account number, it matches the one on file for Grant." The room went dead silent. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to roar. "Grant," Lyle said, his voice barely a whisper, "did you pay yourself an extra $6,000 a month?" Grant looked around the room. The exits were blocked. The logic was watertight. The glitch defense had evaporated. "It is a stipend," Grant burst out. "It is a transition stipend. You approved it, Lyle. You sent me the email saying okay." Lyle looked confused. "I said okay to a system setup. I didn't say okay to you paying yourself a bonus." "It is not a bonus," Grant screamed. "It is compensation. Do you know what you pay me? You pay me 40% less than her." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "I am doing her job, plus the automation work. I am saving you $70,000 a year. I deserve that stipend. I am underpaid." "So you decided to fix it yourself?" Sarah asked. Her tone was dangerous. "I balanced the equation," Grant said. "I am saving the company money. Even with the stipend, I am still cheaper than she was. I am just taking my fair share of the savings. It is efficient." There it was, the confession. He didn't see it as theft. He saw it as arbitrage. He thought he was smart enough to reprice his own labor without asking. "Grant," Sarah said, closing her laptop, "that is not efficiency. That is unauthorized appropriation of company funds, and you did it by manipulating internal controls. That is fraud." Grant scoffed. "Oh, please. It is a few $1,000s. Just deduct it from my next bonus. I will pay it back. It is a loan." Sarah looked at him with a pitying expression. "We are not going to deduct it from your bonus, Grant. We are going to run a retroactive calculation." Grant frowned. "Retro? What do you mean, retro?" He did not understand. He thought retro meant we would just fix the accounting for the future. He did not know that in payroll terms, a retroactive calculation is the nuclear option. It means the system goes back in time. It recalculates every single paycheck from the moment the error started. It looks at the taxes paid, the 401k contributions, the benefits deductions, and it reverses them. "It means," I said, speaking for the first time in minutes, "that the system is going to take back every cent you overpaid yourself. And since you didn't tax that stipend correctly, the system is going to claw back the gross amount, not the net. It is going to take the money you spent, plus the money you owe the IRS." "You can't do that," Grant said. "I already spent it." "The system does not care what you spent," I said. "The system only cares about the balance. And on Tuesday morning when the payroll runs, the system is going to settle the score." Grant looked at Lyle. "Lyle, stop this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I will quit if you want, but don't let them touch my bank account." Lyle looked at the table. He looked at the email with his okay on it. He realized that if he defended Grant now, he would be an accomplice. He would be the CFO who authorized fraud. "I cannot stop it, Grant," Lyle said quietly. "It is an audit finding now. It is out of my hands." Grant slumped into his chair. For the first time, the buzzwords failed him. There was no optimization for this. There was no lean workflow to escape the consequences. I stood up. I picked up my folder. My work was done. "I think you have everything you need for the minutes," I said to Robert Sterling. "I will send you an invoice for my time. 1 hour of consulting." I walked out of the room. Behind me I heard Grant start to argue again, but his voice lacked the fire. He sounded small. He sounded like a man who had just realized that the payroll lady wasn't just pushing buttons. She was the one who built the electric fence he had just tried to climb. I walked to the elevator. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I knew what was coming next. Tuesday was payday, and on Tuesday, PayLattice was going to do exactly what I had programmed it to do. It was going to be ruthless. It was going to be precise, and it was going to hurt. Tuesday morning arrived with the inevitability of a tidal wave. In the payroll world, payday is usually a celebration. It is the one day every 2 weeks when the employees love you. But for Grant Hollis, this Tuesday was not a celebration. It was an execution. I was not in the building. Of course, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching the rain streak against the window, but I did not need to be there to see it. I knew exactly what time the direct deposit notifications went out. I knew exactly how the mobile app interface looked when it refreshed. And thanks to Jenna, who was texting me play-by-play updates from the break room, I knew exactly what happened when Grant unlocked his phone. At 8 in the morning, the notification pinged. Grant likely tapped the screen, expecting to see his inflated balance, his base salary, plus that sweet, unauthorized transition stipend he had grown accustomed to. He probably already had plans for that money. Maybe a lease payment on a car he could not afford, or a weekend trip to Austin. But when the app opened, the number was not positive. It was not even 0. The screen flashed red. The net pay field displayed a number that defied his understanding of physics. It showed a negative balance. It was a debt, and right below it, in bold, unforgiving letters, was the transaction code that sealed his fate. Retroactive overpayment recovery. Full balance. Jenna texted me. He just ran out of his office. He looks like he saw a ghost. Grant did not walk to human resources. He sprinted. He burst through the glass doors of the HR suite with such force that the magnetic lock rattled against the frame. He was not wearing his vest today. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, his face a mask of pure panic. "You stole my money!" Grant screamed. His voice cracked, echoing down the hallway where the recruiters were trying to conduct phone screens. "The app says negative. My account is empty. Who authorized this?" Elaine Porter was waiting for him. She did not look up from her desk immediately. She finished signing a document, capped her pen, and then slowly raised her eyes. She looked like a principal dealing with a toddler who had just painted the walls with spaghetti sauce. "Lower your voice, Grant," Elaine said. "You are disturbing the workspace." "Disturbing the workspace," Grant shouted, waving his phone in the air. "You emptied my bank account. Look at this. Negative $18,000. That is impossible. I want a lawyer. This is wage theft." Elaine stood up. She picked up a single sheet of paper from her desk and walked around to face him. She did not offer him a seat. "It is not wage theft, Grant," Elaine said, her voice ice cold. "It is a correction. Please read this." She handed him the paper. It was a copy of the employee handbook, the specific section on payroll errors and administrative responsibility. It was a section I had written 5 years ago. It stated clearly that in the event of an overpayment caused by administrative error or system misconfiguration, the company reserved the right to recover the full amount immediately from future wages. And since Grant was the administrator, the error was, by definition, self-inflicted. "I didn't agree to this," Grant sputtered, reading the paragraph. "You can't just take it all at once. You have to set up a payment plan. I have rent due." "Technically," Elaine said, crossing her arms, "we usually offer payment plans for accidental overpayments to standard employees. But this was not an accident, Grant, and you are not a standard employee. You are the payroll manager. You manipulated the system to pay yourself unauthorized funds. The Internal Audit Committee determined that this qualifies as a malicious breach of fiduciary duty. Therefore, we are recovering the funds immediately to limit corporate liability." Grant stared at her. "But $18,000 I only took. I mean, the stipend was only $2,500 a check. I've only been here 3 months. That's $15,000 max." This was the moment. This was the twist that Grant, in all his buzzing optimization glory, had failed to calculate. He thought about money in terms of cash in his pocket. He forgot that payroll is about gross numbers, not net. Sarah from Internal Audit stepped out of the adjoining office. She was holding a tablet. "Allow me to explain the math, Grant," she said. Grant spun around. You did this. The system did this," Sarah corrected him. "You see, Grant, when you paid yourself that stipend, you did not just take the cash. You also triggered tax liabilities. You paid federal withholding, Social Security, Medicare, and 401k contributions on that money. The company paid its share of those taxes too." Sarah tapped her screen. "When we ran the retro calculation this morning, the system had to reverse everything to get back the company's money. We have to claw back the gross amount of the overpayment, not the net amount you deposited. We are reversing the last 6 pay periods. The system is taking back the cash you received, plus the taxes you sent to the IRS on our behalf, plus the benefits. The total liability comes to $18,420. Grant looked like he was going to vomit. But I can't get the taxes back from the IRS until I file my return next year. You are taking money I don't have." "That is correct," Sarah said calmly. "You are currently in a negative equity position with the company. Your paycheck this week was absorbed entirely to cover a portion of that debt. You still owe us roughly $15,000, and until that balance is paid, you will not receive a paycheck." Grant turned to Lyle Harrington, who had just walked into the room. Lyle looked pale. He looked like a man who was watching a car crash that he had personally authorized. "Lyle," Grant pleaded, "help me tell them you approved it. You sent the email." Lyle froze. He looked at Elaine. He looked at Sarah. He saw the way they were looking at him like he was a contagion they wanted to contain. I approved a system configuration," Lyle stammered, his voice weak. "I did not approve you paying yourself $18,000 in unauthorized bonuses. Grant, that is a misinterpretation of my directive." "You liar," Grant screamed. "You didn't read the email. You never read anything. You just wanted the savings." "That is enough," Elaine snapped. "Grant, stop trying to deflect. This is your login. This is your configuration." Grant looked around the room, his eyes wild. He realized he was alone. Lyle had abandoned him. Elaine was enforcing the rules. Audit was dissecting him. He needed a villain. He needed someone to blame who wasn't in the room. "It's Brooklyn," Grant yelled, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "She set me up. She knew this would happen. She left a trap in the code. She probably remote accessed the system and changed the logic to multiply the recovery. She is trying to ruin me." Sarah sighed. She looked at Grant with genuine pity. "Grant, we have been over this. Brooklyn's access was terminated months ago. We checked the logs again this morning. The logic that calculated this recovery is the standard out-of-the-box functionality of PayLattice. It is not a trap. It is how payroll works. If you overpay, the system takes it back. Brooklyn didn't do this to you. Math did this to you." Grant slumped against the filing cabinet. "I don't have $18,000, he whispered. "I spent it. I bought a boat." "Well," Elaine said, her voice devoid of sympathy, "I suggest you sell the boat, because we are not done." Sarah stepped forward again. "There is one more thing. Grant, while reviewing the logs for the recovery, we found another issue, a compliance issue." Grant looked up, tears forming in his eyes. "What now?" "When you merge the night shift differential into the base pay to optimize the earning codes," Sarah said, making air quotes around the word optimize. "You didn't just overpay the warehouse staff. You changed the tax classification of their wages. You categorized shift premiums as standard salary. So," Grant sniffed, "it's all income." "It is not all income to the city of Dallas," Sarah said. "The city has a specific local tax exemption for certain types of overtime and shift premiums for logistics workers. By merging the codes, you removed that exemption. You have been overtaxing the employees and underreporting the exempt wages to the city for 3 months." Lyle let out a low moan. "Oh, God." "We received an automated notice from the local tax authority this morning," Sarah continued. They flagged the variance in our quarterly filing. They are launching an inquiry, and since the configuration change was tagged with your user ID, Grant, you are personally named in the audit trail as the responsible party for the misreporting. Grant's face went white. In the corporate world, stealing from the company is bad. But messing with the tax authority, that is a career death sentence. You can survive being fired. You cannot survive being blacklisted for tax negligence. Am I going to jail? Grant asked, his voice barely audible. That depends on how cooperative you are. Robert Sterling, the corporate counsel, said as he stepped into the room. He had been listening from the hallway. And it depends on how quickly you can pay back the $18,000 you owe us. Lyle Harrington wiped sweat from his forehead. He realized that the OK email was going to be Exhibit A in the external audit. He realized that saving $70,000 on my salary was about to cost the company 10 times that in legal fees and fines. Grant looked at his phone again. The red numbers were still there. The negative sign was still there. The reality of the situation finally crashed down on him. He wasn't a disruptor. He wasn't a genius. He was just a guy who had tried to cheat a calculator. I think I need to sit down, Grant said. You can sit, Elaine said, but do it in the lobby. I need your badge and your laptop. We are placing you on administrative leave pending the final investigation. Jenna texted me one last time. Security is escorting him to his desk to get his keys. He is crying. I finished my tea. The rain had stopped. The sun was starting to peek through the clouds. It was a beautiful Tuesday. My bank account was intact. My conscience was clear. And somewhere in Dallas, a young man was learning the most expensive lesson of his life. You can fake confidence, you can fake a resume, but you can never, ever fake the payroll. The conference room on the top floor of Brighthaven Medical Logistics was usually reserved for board meetings and acquiring smaller companies. It was a room designed to intimidate. The table was a long slab of mahogany that cost more than my first car, and the chairs were leather thrones that swallowed you whole. Today the room did not feel like a place of business. It felt like a courtroom. I sat at the far end of the table. I was not an employee anymore, but Robert Sterling, the corporate counsel, had asked me to attend as an external subject matter expert. He wanted me to witness the autopsy of the system I had built. To my left sat Elaine Porter from HR, looking like she had swallowed a lemon. Across from her was Sarah from Internal Audit with her inevitable laptop. At the head of the table sat Arthur Vance, the CEO of Brighthaven. Arthur was a man who rarely got involved in operational details. If he was here, it meant the damage was not just financial, it was existential. And then there were the accused. Grant Hollis sat in the middle of the table. He looked smaller than I remembered. His confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a young man in a wrinkled shirt who kept tapping his leg nervously under the table. Next to him sat Lyle Harrington, the CFO. Lyle was trying to project an air of authority, but his eyes kept darting toward Arthur at the head of the table. Robert Sterling stood up. He did not smile. He held a file folder in his hand and treated it like a weapon. "Let us begin," Robert said. His voice was calm and dry. "We are here to establish the facts regarding the payroll irregularities discovered during the retroactive audit of the last quarter. We need to determine liability." Robert turned to me first. He treated me like a star witness. "Ms. Flores," Robert said, "for the record, please state your relationship to the specific earning code labeled Transition Stipend currently active in the PayLattice system." I sat up straight. "I have no relationship to it. That code did not exist during my tenure." "Grant Hollis claims that this code was a legacy artifact that you created but left dormant," Robert said, glancing at Grant. "He claims he simply reactivated it." "That is a lie," I said. I slid a piece of paper across the mahogany surface. "This is the email confirmation from the IT department dated 5:30 in the afternoon on my final day. It confirms that my access was revoked and my user ID was terminated. It also lists the complete table of earning codes that existed at that moment. There is no transition stipend on this list. If it exists now, it was created after I left the building. Robert nodded and turned to Sarah. Audit, please verify the timeline. Sarah adjusted her glasses and looked at her screen. She did not look at Grant. She read the data like she was reading a weather report. The timeline is clear, Sarah said. On October 14th at 9 in the morning, Grant Hollis submitted a ticket to IT, requesting emergency administrative rights citing operational necessity. At 9:45, the rights were granted. At 10 o'clock exactly, the user ID G. Hollis created the new earning code. At 10:15, the same user ID assigned that code to his own employee profile. Grant shifted in his seat. I told you, he stammered. I was fixing a gap in the compensation structure. I was just doing what was necessary to keep the department running. Wait, Sarah said. She held up a hand. I am not finished. At 10:30, the user ID G. Hollis edited the effective date of the stipend. He backdated it by 2 weeks. He manipulated the system to make it look like the decision had been made in the previous pay cycle. The room went silent. Backdating a financial record is not an optimization. It is falsification of records. It is a crime. I was just aligning it with the fiscal calendar, Grant whispered. And then, Sarah continued, her voice dropping an octave. We found something else. We found a pattern. This was the moment the air left the room. Grant stopped tapping his leg. He froze. We noticed that the transition stipend was not the only irregularity, Sarah said. We ran a query for all manual adjustments made by Grant Hollis in the last 90 days. We found a recurring payment labeled mileage adjustment attached to an employee in the operations department, a Mr. Jason Miller. Grant closed his eyes. Who is Jason Miller? Arthur Vance asked. His voice was deep and rumbling. He is the night shift supervisor, Elaine said, and according to our social media check, he is also Grant's former college roommate. Jason drives a lot for work, Grant blurted out. He uses his personal truck. I was just reimbursing him for the wear and tear. We checked the GPS logs on the company trucks, Sarah said ruthlessly. Jason Miller has not driven a single mile for company business in 3 months. He works a desk job in the warehouse, yet you paid him $600 every 2 weeks for mileage. That is $1,200 a month of company money funneled to your friend. Arthur Vance leaned forward. He looked at Grant with a mixture of confusion and disgust. Son, Arthur said, I hired you because Lyle told me you were an innovator. I hired you to save us money. But you have turned my payroll department into a game of roulette. You are not just stealing. You are bringing your friends in to help you loot the place. It wasn't looting, Grant cried. Jason helped me with the data migration. I couldn't pay him as a contractor, so I used the mileage code. It was a workaround. It was theft, Robert Sterling corrected him. And it was conspiracy. Robert then turned his gaze to Lyle Harrington. Lyle had been very quiet, hoping that if he didn't move, the predator wouldn't see him. Lyle, Robert said, we have an email chain here. Grant asked for approval on a system configuration. You replied with the letters, OK. Grant used that email as his authorization to pay himself $60,000 a year. Lyle straightened his tie. His hands were shaking. Robert, look, it was a busy day. I receive hundreds of emails. I thought he was asking about a software setting. I didn't know he was asking for money. It was a misunderstanding, a small oversight. Small, Robert asked. He picked up the tax notice from the city of Dallas regarding the misclassified overtime. Because of your oversight, we are facing a tax audit. Because of your oversight, we have an administrator paying his college roommate for phantom mileage. This is not a small oversight, Lyle. In legal terms, this is a total control failure. You signed off on a document you didn't read. You gave the keys to the bank vault to a 29-year-old with no background check, and you went to play golf. Lyle turned red. I trusted him. He had great references. You wanted him because he was cheap, Arthur Vance said. And now we know why he was cheap. Arthur turned back to Grant. The CEO's face was hard as stone. Grant, Arthur said, you are done. I do not want you in this building a second longer than necessary. Surrender your badge. Grant looked at the table. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his plastic ID card. He slid it across the mahogany. It made a scratching sound that seemed deafening in the quiet room. Elaine Porter opened a folder she had brought with her. She placed 2 documents in front of Grant. "We have 2 options for you, Grant," Elaine said. Her voice was businesslike. "Option A is immediate termination for cause. This involves a formal report to the police for embezzlement and fraud. It will go on your permanent record. Future employers will see it when they run a background check. We will press charges for the full amount plus legal fees." Grant looked at the paper. He looked like he was going to be sick. "What is option B?" he asked. "Option B," Elaine said, tapping the second document, "is a voluntary resignation effective immediately. You agree to pay back the full $18,000 plus the money you paid to Mr. Miller. You agree to a strict repayment plan garnished from your final settlement and any future tax refunds until the debt is cleared. In exchange, we will not file criminal charges today. However, we will mark your file as ineligible for rehire, and we will respond to any reference checks with the dates of employment only. But if I resign, I don't get unemployment benefits," Grant said. His voice was weak. "You don't get unemployment benefits when you go to prison either," Robert Sterling pointed out. "Take the deal, Grant. It is the only mercy you are going to get today." Grant looked at Lyle one last time, hoping for a savior. Lyle looked away, studying the grain of the wood on the table. Lyle knew he was next. He knew that once Grant was gone, the audit team would turn their attention to the CFO who signed blindly. Grant picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed the resignation letter. He was not the arrogant tech disruptor anymore. He was not the genius who was going to streamline the workflow. He was just a liability being written off the books. "The access to Pay Lattice has already been terminated," Sarah said as Grant finished signing. "Your company phone has been remotely wiped. Security is waiting outside to escort you to your car. You are not permitted to return to your desk." "My personal stuff," Grant whispered. "My framed photos." "We will box them and mail them to you," Elaine said. "Goodbye, Grant." Grant stood up. He looked at me. For a second I thought he was going to scream again. I thought he was going to blame the legacy code or the system architecture, but he didn't. He looked at me with a look of pure exhaustion. He realized finally that the system wasn't broken. The system worked exactly as it was designed. It was designed to catch people like him. He walked out of the room. The heavy door clicked shut behind him. The room remained silent for a long moment. Then Arthur Vance turned to me. "Brooklyn," he said, "I apologize. It seems we made a calculation error 3 months ago. We thought we were cutting fat. It turns out we were cutting muscle." "It happens," I said simply. "Payroll is invisible until it isn't." "Lyle," Arthur said without looking at his CFO, "you and I have a meeting in my office. Now, bring your resignation letter draft just in case." Lyle stood up slowly. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He followed the CEO out of the room, leaving me alone with Elaine, Robert, and Sarah. "Well," Robert said, closing his file, "that was efficient." "It was necessary," I replied. "Thank you for coming, Brooklyn," Elaine said. She actually smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was genuine. "We will process your consulting invoice immediately. No net negative adjustments, I promise." I stood up and smoothed my blazer. "Just make sure you check the audit trail next time, Elaine. The system always tells you the truth if you know where to look." I walked out of the conference room. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I felt satisfied. It was the satisfaction of a ledger that finally balances down to the last penny. Grant was gone. The money would be recovered. The chaos was over. But I knew the story wasn't quite finished. There was one final loose end to tie up, one final scene to play before the credits rolled, and I intended to walk out of it with my head held high. Grant chose the path of least resistance, or perhaps it was the path of least public humiliation. He sat at the mahogany table and stared at the resignation letter for a long time. His pen hovered over the signature line. He looked like a man trying to find a loophole in a contract that was watertight. "I am signing this," Grant said, his voice raspy. But I want it noted that I am doing this to pursue other opportunities. I do not want the word embezzlement in my file." Elaine Porter did not blink. She stood over him like a sentinel. "Grant, the internal file will state the truth because we are legally required to document the reason for the financial recovery. However, for external inquiries, we will simply confirm your dates of employment. But I need you to be very clear on one thing. By signing this voluntary resignation, you are waiving your right to unemployment benefits. You cannot claim you were let go without cause. You are quitting. Do you understand?" Grant swallowed hard. He understood. He was trading his financial safety net for a shred of dignity. He pressed the pen to the paper and signed his name. It was a messy scrawl, nothing like the confident, sweeping signature he had used to authorize his own stipend 3 months ago. "Done," he whispered. "Thank you," Elaine said. She took the paper and slid it into her folder. Security is waiting. While Grant was being escorted to his desk to collect his personal effects, I went with Sarah from internal audit to the server room. We did not go there to gloat. We went there to perform the digital equivalent of an exorcism. Sarah logged into PayLattice with her super administrator credentials. We watched the monitor as the system processed the final adjustment batch. It was a beautiful thing to witness. The system took the $18,000 debt and posted it as a receivable account. It reversed the tax liabilities. It zeroed out the transition stipend code and then deactivated it, flagging it with a permanent "do not use" warning. The general ledger updated in real time. The variance that had haunted the books for 90 days vanished. The numbers aligned. The debit column matched the credit column down to the last penny. It felt like walking into a chaotic, dirty room and snapping your fingers to find everything perfectly folded and put away. The bank reconciliation for the month was finally closed. The ghost money was gone. Back in the executive suite, the fallout for Lyle Harrington was less public but equally brutal. I did not see the meeting between him and Arthur Vance, but the memo that went out to the senior leadership team 10 minutes later told the whole story. The subject line was, "Immediate updates to Financial Approval Authority." The memo stated that effective immediately, all non-standard compensation adjustments required the dual signature of the CEO and the external auditor. Lyle retained his title as CFO, but he had been stripped of his power. He was now just a figurehead, a man who would spend the rest of his tenure checking boxes that someone else had already approved. The company announced the immediate launch of a comprehensive internal controls project, which was corporate speak for, "We are going to check every single thing Lyle and Grant touched for the last 90 days. I walked down to the main floor to say my final goodbyes. The office was quiet. The rumor mill works faster than fiber optics, and everyone knew that Grant was leaving. I saw him standing at his desk. He was holding a cardboard box. He had packed his stress ball, his framed degree, and the tablet he loved so much. He looked strikingly ordinary, without the arrogance, without the buzzwords. He was just a young man in a wrinkled shirt who had made a terrible calculation. He looked up and saw me standing by the exit. He stopped. For the first time since we met, he did not look at me with disdain. He did not look at me as the payroll lady or an obstacle to his genius. He looked at me as a human being who had survived something he could not. He walked over to me. The box rattled in his hands. "You won," Grant said. He tried to say it with a sneer, but it came out sounding tired. "I hope you are happy. You destroyed my career over a few $1,000s. I looked at him. I felt no anger. I felt no joy. I just felt the cold, hard clarity of my profession. "No, Grant," I said softly. "I did not win, and I did not destroy you. The books won. The ledger always wins eventually. I am just the person who knows how to read it." He opened his mouth to argue, to throw one last insult, but he stopped. He realized there was no point. You cannot argue with math. He adjusted his grip on the box, lowered his head, and walked out the glass doors into the heat of the Texas afternoon. He was gone. Elaine Porter came up behind me. She was holding a thick envelope. "This is for you," she said. I opened it. It was a formal letter on Brighthaven letterhead, signed by both Arthur Vance and Elaine. It was a statement of professional exoneration. It explicitly stated that all payroll errors, tax penalties, and system misconfigurations occurred after my employment had ceased and were the sole result of unauthorized changes made by subsequent management. It confirmed that my tenure had been exemplary and that I had left the system in a state of perfect compliance. "We also included a recommendation letter," Elaine added. "Arthur insisted. He said it was the least we could do since we tried to replace a structural engineer with a decorator." "Thank you, Elaine," I said. "Good luck with the tax audit." "We will need it," she sighed. "But at least we know what we are fighting now." I walked out of the building. The automatic doors slid open with a familiar whoosh. The air outside was hot and smelled of ozone from the recent storm. I walked to my car, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had defended my name. I had protected my craft. I had proven that experience is not an expense, it is an insurance policy. As I reached for my door handle, my phone vibrated in my purse. I pulled it out. It was a number I did not recognize, but the area code was from Austin. "Hello, this is Brooklyn," I answered. "Hi, Brooklyn," a woman's voice said. "This is Sarah from Zenith Global Logistics. We received your resume a few weeks ago, but to be honest, we heard through the grapevine about what just happened at Brighthaven. The industry is small." I tensed up. "I can explain the situation." "You do not need to explain anything," the woman interrupted. "We heard that you spotted a six-figure compliance risk from outside the building. That is exactly the kind of oversight we need. We are looking for a payroll controls manager. The salary is significantly higher than what you were making before. When can you start?" I smiled. I looked back at the glass tower of Brighthaven. I saw the sun reflecting off the windows of the office where Grant used to sit. "I can start on Monday," I said. "But I have one condition. I need full administrative access on day one. I like to check the logs." The woman laughed. "We wouldn't have it any other way." I hung up the phone and got into my car. I started the engine and turned up the radio. They had tried to cut costs. They had tried to trim the fat. They thought that payroll was just a button you push, a cost center to be minimized. But they learned the hard way. Cheaper is never cheaper if you pay for it with stupidity. I drove out of the parking lot, leaving the chaos behind me. I was not just the payroll lady anymore. I was the audit, and that was the day they learned you can replace a person, but you cannot replace the truth in payroll. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I really hope you enjoyed following Brooklyn's journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, working, or maybe relaxing at home? Please leave a comment below and let me know your location and your thoughts on Grant's downfall. If you want more satisfying stories like this, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Boss Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story get heard by more people. Your support means the world to us.